Can being a sports fan turn you to porn? Well, today on Finding Traction, we kick off that topic.
Guys ready?
When it comes to porn, are you stuck, spinning out, or slipping backwards in your life? If so, then welcome to the Finding Traction podcast, a show dedicated to those who are looking to gain recovery momentum away from porn and toward the life and relationships they have always hoped for. Now, here's your host, Vern Tomke.
Well, today is an interesting podcast I have for you. It's a little bit of my confessions from this last week. And let me just say, if you're not a real sports fan, I mean a real sports fan, it could be hockey, it could be Premier League soccer or football across the pond. It could be football. It could be, it could be whatever your sport is. If you are not a super strong, rabid sports fan, it could be college football. I know a lot of people, or college basketball. If you're not in that ilk, you probably are not going to understand today's podcast. It's going to go right over your head. You're going to think, what is the deal? Get over it. This doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. So if you are that kind of person, maybe the next podcast might hit you where it hurts. But if you are, like me, a real sports fan, then this podcast might interest you. And of course, it's a bit of my true confessions from this past week. And I guess what got me thinking about this is last podcast I had interviewed John Fort from Be Broken Ministries. And he referenced this study on Super Bowl Sunday. And they took the Google searches, which you can track these, of course, and they compared the Google searches for the city of the winning football team, NFL, and then the Google searches for from the city of the losing Super Bowl team, and they compared them, and they found there was a much higher percentage of porn searches and people watching porn from the losing NFL football city. And so that was last podcast. And so that was kind of sitting in my resident memory. And I was really excited when that podcast was done. I put it up because I said, hey, John, the rest of the day I'm going to watch football. It's American Thanksgiving and my team is playing the Cowboys. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I don't know what it is with Thanksgiving, but my Cowboys have a horrible record on Thanksgiving. They play every Thanksgiving, like so do the Detroit Lions. And shouts out to Matt Dobschutz because his Chicago Bears won for a change on their game. But my team ended up losing in overtime. That means it comes right down to the very end. It's a nail biter in the very end. And they ended up losing the game. Now, again, if you're not a sports fan, you should have already stopped listening at this point. And if you're a Philadelphia Eagle fan, you're privately gloating right now, or you hate the Cowboys. It made your day, Thanksgiving Day. But I'm just wondering what the porn searches were like for all of the Cowboy fans that day. I know where my thoughts turned to, because as I watched the game, I was becoming increasingly agitated. And the first emotion that I would have described in watching the game, and when they finally lost the game, there was a penalty that brought them into field goal range and they kicked the field goal, was anger. I mean, I was angry I was angry, and the best place to turn your anger to is, of course, the referees. Of course, the game was stolen from us by the referees. What losing football fan or any fan doesn't think their losing team got unjustly treated by the referees? And I could point to many situations. Don't get me started, but I was angry at those referees and the way they unjustly, unfairly treated my team in the game. But I had a guy, I'm coaching a guy he's had years of counseling, and we were talking about anger one day, and he said to me, Vern, he said, anger's not a primary emotion. And I says, well, tell me more. He's been in counseling for years and years, so he's learned a lot about emotions. And he said to me, anger's not a primary, emotion. One of the emotions, which is behind anger, but one of the key emotions behind anger is sadness. And so here I had John's comments and me and my other buddy's comments. And I sat here in the same room, and I was thinking to myself, you know what? I'm sad. The emotion of sadness was super strong. My face was heated. I was sad. Now, again, some of you are going, good grief, Vern, isn't Chilliwack, didn't they just have a flood? Which we did. People have had their farms destroyed. They've had their basements flooded. And here's Vern sad about a football game. Now, I get it. But again, this is for sports fans. So for the rest of you should have turned this podcast off a long time ago. Because if you are a real sports fan, that means you emotionally get into a game. You are emotionally committed to your team. When your team wins, you win. When your team loses, you lose. And I'm learning to be self-aware with my emotions. And I sat there and going, you know what? I am really feeling, well, I'm angry, but I'm mostly sad. I thought that was a really good description. I am really sad right now. And there was a part of me that says, well, I know what to do with sadness. Like all of those losing sports teams on Super Bowl Sunday, I know what I can turn to that will take that feeling away, that unpleasant feeling away. Because who likes to feel sad? For years, it would have been porn. And it got me thinking, about this. It's like, Jay Stringer came up with the concept of eroticized anger. But recently I've been thinking about this, and maybe somebody said it, and I listen to podcasts all the time, but somebody described all feelings. Any feeling of the rainbow, any feeling of the spectrum can be eroticized, depending on what you've associated that feeling with. So for me, sadness, I would often turn away from sadness and towards porn. Some people turn away from anger and move towards porn, let's say to punish their wife or that kind of scenario. But I realized by training, I had come to eroticize the feeling of sadness that happened on game day. And I mean, it's I don't know why they put football on Thanksgiving, because half of all the teams are going to, for the sports fans, it's going to mess their Thanksgiving up. Thanksgiving is a big deal to Americans, I've figured out. So half of you have been bummed out. We don't have Thanksgiving on that day. Our Thanksgiving is a month earlier, so I didn't have my Thanksgiving messed up, but many of you did. Think of the poor Detroit fans, yet they've learned to be grateful. So I'm thinking about this and going, okay, I really am experiencing sadness right now. I want to sit in that. I just sat in my chair and I sat in that emotion going, I am really feeling sad right now. I'm feeling a strong emotion. A part of me wants to hive off and head towards porn to comfort myself. But it was important for me to speak that out. And I've heard from others who work with guys that I'm not the only one that struggles with this. People who work with guys around porn would say that sports and something like a sports loss can very quickly turn guys to porn. So I guess I'm using this as a lesson to go, okay, I am learning something, and I am learning to, number one, to call it out for what it is. Number two, acknowledging. And then number three, I went, my wife was watching TV, and I sat down beside her and I just said, I am sad. I grieve, and I laughed a little bit, and now my wife could have just turned over to me and said, well, suck it up, it's just a football game. But she is too kind for that. She's too sweet for that. Anybody who knows her, she says, I know you're sad. When she'd heard, of course, she wasn't watching the game, when she'd heard that my team had lost, it's one thing to lose, get just kicked out of a game, like lose big time, but to lose on the last play of the game, like that's the worst. And it was important for me to say that to her, for me to be able to joke about that. I had a few friends, and I always have people who text me during the game. I learned to not have my phone anywhere near me during the game, because often I can't watch it live. During Thursday, I was teaching, and I knew the game was on, and I was teaching in a middle school. And so when I got home, I made sure not to turn on my phone. But I have guys texting me, some of them were joking and, haha, your team lost. And you know what? I can handle that, because if you can't trash talk as a sports fan, that just removes a big component of it. And I have been known to trash talk with the best of them. But at the same time, I had a few, really good friends who said, I'm so sorry for your loss. Now, again, you could minimize this and say, wow, Vern's got a real problem. He's got to get his priorities straight. But we can become sad about all sorts of things, But let's go back to this eroticized emotions. Can different emotions be eroticized? You've all learned, we've all learned that acronym: hungry, angry, lonely, tired, could be stressed or whatever. There goes the phone. One sec. Well, that's really funny, because you heard the phone ring, and that was Matt. He wanted to call, and Matt Dobschutz from Porn Free Radio wanted to call and talk about the football game. So we had a good chat, and it was just a great time to ask him this question from the guys he works with and questions he gets. I said, hey, Matt, this is the podcast, but I want to just make sure that this is not just me. I said to him, have you, in your years of working with guys in your rev groups, and have you seen this sports effect where guys are turning to porn because of sports, losing a sports game? And he says, absolutely. He said, that's not a rare thing. That's a pretty common thing. Guys that are super into college basketball, college football, pro football, hockey, whatever it is, he just said, a number of guys, that's not, that's not unusual. So I guess I'm not so unusual. So I'm going to go with that. Again, this whole idea of eroticized emotions. What emotions do you have that you associate, that have become eroticized? Sadness, anger, boredom. Boredom is a huge one, right? But so you just think about it. It's just anything when you feel a strong emotion that you reach for the medicine cabinet, so to speak. This whole idea of actually being able to sit in a negative emotion is something that I feel like I'm just learning. After the game, just to sit in that emotion of sadness and go, you know what? I feel sad. And just to not push it away, to not be afraid of it, to embrace it, maybe a bit strong, but just to say, that's part of the human experience. We referenced the book by Eddie Caparucci, Going Deeper. And in his book, he describes learning to sit in negative emotions. Most of us have learned, probably from, if we started porn, in our pre-teenage years and through our adolescence, we've really learned to simply put negative emotions on pause. And so, whenever one began to encroach on us, we ran to porn so that we didn't we didn't feel it. And then what often happens is, that pain that follows a porn binge, that usually supersedes everything because we just feel so crappy about ourselves that it's almost like it's a bigger pain that takes away from that primary pain that we may have felt. So I'm going to go with that. So that is my experience from Thanksgiving. And it's a good learning experience for me. And I'd like to use this as a window into learning to become better with negative emotions of all sorts. Some people struggle with having super positive emotions. They go to porn as a reward. So that's another whole thing. Maybe in that situation, your team wins the Super Bowl. They didn't say that nobody was on those winning cities going to porn. So maybe there were some people who were turning to porn to celebrate. But I think, as we probably would guess, it's more when people are in pain or disappointment or sadness that people seek to comfort themselves in those situations. So there you go. That's, again, that's for all of us sports fans, learning to navigate that. And there's been times where I've just stopped watching sports for a while just because I've tried to deal with it that way. I think a better scenario, though, is for me to learn to sit in negative emotions. One thing I've noticed, and me and Matt were talking about this as well, he said, and I identify with this, people get so into a game. It's like there's so much nervous energy when your team is playing. Like I can watch a whole bunch of games that are not my team, and I'm just dispassionate and I just kind of watch it, and it doesn't affect me because they're not my teams. There's teams I dislike, so I like to see them lose. The Schadenfreude in me, but I notice when my team's playing, my emotions are elevated. Probably I'm into it emotionally. And, it's possible even in that situation that we've got to learn to deal with that as a heightened emotional thing. So anyways, so there you go, sports fans. I hope your team wins, but even if they don't win, I'm just hoping that you learn some strategies, you learn to navigate through good seasons and bad seasons. You learn to navigate through good emotions and bad emotions. So until next time, here's towards finding traction. Have a great day.